Hello, I'm Stephen Ryan and this is Matthew Lucas. We're the Horti-Culturalists and we post once a week, so don't forget to hit subscribe, and we'd love you to like as well and press the alert button so that you will be reminded of our once a week videos.
There you go. Mr. Ryan, we're by the Chook House.
Yes.
We're next to this fabulous thing, but I'm thinking this is not the focus of our attention today. What is?
Well, the focus of our attention, if you look above my head, is in fact those big red trumpety flowers that you can see up there. And it's a Brugmansia.
Brugmansia. Now, is this a shamanistic, hallucinogenic, drug-inducing plant?
Yes.
Let's go!
No, don't. I warn you. It's one of those plants that people, every so often there's this big sort of public scare campaign about Brugmansias.
Yep.
Yes, they can be hallucinogenic. It normally only affects, apparently young men seem to try it out. So
young men, don't try this.
Yeah, don't try it. You need to be an experienced shaman if you're going to use this plant.
Luckily, Stephen, I am.
Oh, right.
No, I'm not.
It can take you on a really nasty trip. So it is, in fact, an hallucinogenic and obviously toxic if you have it in any sort of quantity.
But you know what? So are daffodil bulbs.
Well, exactly. Daphne is poisonous. I mean,
Daphne?
Rhubarb leaves. Green potatoes. I mean, life is full of plants that could be
cruelty
toxic.
and injustice.
Yes, exactly. So, yes, there is a problem with these plants, but one has to ingest it first. If you leave them alone in the garden, they're fine.
And you just admire them because they are beautiful, and this is in full flight. So we will have a closer look at your Brugmansia.
Yes, and this particular one is the only one that is cold hardy enough for me to actually grow at Macedon, because we get quite reasonable frosts during the winter. We're lucky we haven't had a decent autumn frost yet, because it's actually cold induced, which starts at flowering. And of course, when it's really cold, then its flowers all turn black and fall off because of the frost.
Okay, let's have a closer look.
All right, fantastic. Brugmansia sanguinea.
Yep.
Now, this particular species comes from the mountains of Colombia. It's reasonably hardy. It certainly will cope with the heat in the summer and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Frost in the winter will take it down, unfortunately. But if I don't get heavy frosts, this will flower right through until the spring. So it can be quite spectacular.
Wow.
I mean, it's a 4-metre shrub.
Yeah.
Almost verging on small tree, and it's got literally hundreds of these amazing trumpets with the sort of, if you look at it closely, they're sort of greenish towards the stem end, and then they sort of veer out where you've got this sort of lovely stripes of colour going through them to this beautiful sort of cherry red colour on the tips, and of course inside they're yellow, and it is a beautiful plant.
Now, are they pollinated by hummingbirds? Is that why the flower is so long, the trumpet's so long?
I actually think this one might be moth-pollinated, but red is often an indicator of, in fact, bird pollination, because birds can see red very well. And so a lot of South American things, and in fact up into Central America and into southern North America, have red tubular flowers, and that's almost always an indicator that they are in fact hummingbird pollinated.
Wow, so firstly, I love Brugmansias. So secondly, this would flower all winter if it wasn't cut down by frost. So clearly in its native Andean habitat, it doesn't get sub-zero, doesn't get frost.
No, they don't get frost in their natural habitat. But having said that, mine will get frosted when we get a heavy one. But it will always come back again, because it's such an old plant that it's got lots of woody tissue and big thick stems at the base. So although the top might get bitten off it, it will still come back again.
If you have a heavy frost the following year, I mean, how long will it take to regenerate and flower? Would it flower the next year if it gets frost damage?
Yeah, it will be back in flower within months of the frost's finishing. So
really?
I can still get good flowers on it in late summer, early autumn without a problem, even if it gets really badly frostbitten.
Now, hang on. When does it flower then?
Well, mainly winter, but you can get sort of sporadic flowering throughout the year. So because it will have been hit, it will reshoot and then it will reset more flower buds. So I may well get some summer flowers. But the flowers during the warmer months of the year are quite sporadic. So you'll just have a little cluster of flowers for a while, then it'll stop, then it'll get another batch. It's only when the cool weather of the autumn sets in that it sets lots of flower buds.
As you can see from this one, it is literally just dripping with all these amazing flowers. It's stunning.
Yeah. Now, a couple of other things people need to know about this particular species.
Yes.
Apart from its more cold hardy characteristics,
Yeah.
this one has no perfume, whereas a lot of the more tropical ones are quite highly scented.
Funny you mentioned that. I was in Sydney a few weeks ago walking through Paddington, and there was an ivory coloured Brugmansia, and the fragrance, it was actually overwhelming. It filled the whole street.
It can actually be a bit nauseating
if
it's too much. So this one isn't scented.
No.
There is another species that, as far as I know, isn't in Australia and may actually just be a subspecies of this one that I seriously want, called Brugmansia volcanicola.
Volcanicola?
Yeah, it's some...
Volcanicola?
Yeah, well, exactly. It comes from a volcano side. That's where the name comes from. And it's similar to this from what I've read and seen, but I don't think we have volcanicola in Australia. But I want it because it may even be slightly more cold hardy than this one.
Right. And so, talking of hardiness then, they are a relatively high altitude plant. So they're relatively cold tolerant, but not
frost
or freezing.
Yeah.
So, ergo, are they not... They are heat sensitive, so you couldn't grow them in very hot climates.
This will not grow in Queensland.
Right.
A friend of mine up there was quite jealous. He grows all of the other Brugmansias beautifully up around Mackay in Queensland.
In the tropics?
In the tropics. But this one he can't grow because it isn't cool enough for it.
So this is definitely a cool climate Brugmansia.
But not a cold climate one.
Right.
There are minute differences.
It sounds like a Nancy Mitford novel.
Yes.
Brugmansias in a cold climate. Now, I've seen Brugmansias a lot grown in pots. I actually saw them a lot in Morocco.
Yeah.
A lot of Brugmansias in pots in Morocco. What about this one, the cold...
No reason why not.
Mountain species.
The trouble with these, because they are quite large growing plants, you may have to roll it out of the pot every couple of years, root prune it, cut the top back and sort of start it off again, because otherwise they're going to get quite leggy and probably a bit hungry. So,
like the best of us.
Yeah, so you may have to manage it, but yes, there's absolutely no reason why these couldn't be grown as pot plants. So in really cold areas, you take them in for the winter, hopefully perhaps even flower them in the orangery, which would be rather handsome.
The orangery that we all have.
Yes, that's right, exactly. And then you could put it outdoors for the summer. It would be perfectly happy in most of Britain and North America during the summer months, but it would need to go indoors for the winter.
Right. Beautiful thing. Now, you've got another one. Are we going to go and look at that one?
Yes, we will. It's another form of this same one.
Okay, let's go.
All right, fantastic.
And here we are, working our way through the Columbian Highlands. Ta-da! Look at this yellow one.
Yes, this is a form, subspecies. I'm not quite sure exactly what it is, but it's a form of sanguineous, and it's generally sold as Flava, which means yellow. So it's the Flava form, and it is a beautiful yellow and green flowered version, and I have both of them growing next to each other, and they do something really interesting when you've got more than one clone.
They have fun at the weekend.
Yes, they do. If you've got a single Brugmansia all on its own, it won't produce fruit. And when I say fruit, I don't mean edible fruit, I just mean the fruit of the plant, so don't get carried away.
Although it does look like it would be peelable and eatable. It looks kind of like a giant kiwi fruit.
Oh, I was going to say choco.
What's a choco?
Oh, you haven't seen a choco? Oh,
forgive me.
Yeah, those in Sydney will know exactly what I'm talking about. It does look like a choco, but don't get excited and cook it. It will produce viable seed. I regularly get self-sown seedlings coming up around the garden here, and I've always been on the lookout for one that flowers that is intermediate in colour between the yellow one and the orangey red one. Yeah. But so far they've just been yellow or orangey red.
True to type.
Yeah, so they seem to just stay true to type, but they will produce these great big pods on them if you've got more than one clone.
Honestly, it is amazing. Now, I want to cast our mind back to an episode we did about Iochroma, which is no longer called Iochroma.
Well, that particular species is no longer called Iochroma. But anyhow,
I don't know. These taxonomists, they need to just calm down and get out more. But so to me, the leaf, the habit, the flower looks so much like Iochroma.
It is, and they're related. They're in the Solanaceae family, but that also means they're in the same family as potatoes, tomatoes, eggplants.
Oh, you can see that in the leaf, the eggplant leaf.
Yeah, so they're all in the same family, and it's really interesting that you've got a family that's got plants that are perfectly edible and safe, and plants that are completely non-edible and completely unsafe to use, all in the same family.
But let's touch on the safety thing though. So having them in the garden, brushing past it, smelling it, touching the leaves. all fine.
All fine. You've got to ingest the plant for it to cause any issues.
So the moral of the story is...
don't eat what doesn't come in a carton from the supermarket. I don't know.
Don't lick your Brugmansia, I guess.
Yeah, no, you just leave it alone and enjoy it in the garden. I mean, it's perfectly safe if it's just left to its own devices. So it is a wonderful plant, and all of the plants in that family can have toxins. I mean, potato leaves are poisonous.
Yes.
Potatoes tubers are if they go green.
Yes.
So there's, and I'm sure if you ate tomato leaves or even eggplant leaves, they're probably poisonous as well.
So deadly nightshade is the same family?
Same family but different genus. So true deadly nightshade is a thing called a Tropa belladonna, which means beautiful lady.
Yes.
Because they used to use the juice for
in their eyes.
Yeah, and it would make their eyes glow.
And then kill them slowly.
Yeah, but exactly. So it's probably one of those things we shouldn't do, like lead-based makeup as well was probably a bad move.
Yes.
So there's a lot of toxins in this group of plants, but there's a lot of edibility as well. So it's a really interesting family, the Solanaceae family.
And so propagation, you've got viable seed there. How do you propagate them?
I generally grow them from canes. You can just cut them into sort of pieces about a foot long in the old measurements. They can be the size of a broom handle, doesn't really matter.
So it doesn't matter what type of wood?
No, you can use old wood, you can use younger wood. I generally strip the leaves off because they're in the way. Just put them in as canes and they'll strike fairly readily. Generally during the warmer months they tend to strike very quickly. So easy to propagate, and as I said, I get the occasional self-sown seedling, but I can never be sure whether it's going to be the yellow or the red one till it flowers. So I wouldn't grow them commercially that way because I couldn't promise which colour people were going to get.
So given that it's a mountain species, is it a bit of a water guzzler?
It's surprising actually because the stems are full of moisture, the foliage is fairly succulent, and so in fact the plant is actually fairly self-sustaining as far as water is concerned. If it gets really dry, the leaves will hang or wilt slightly. Whack the hose in underneath them, everything should be fine. But I rarely water these during the summer.
I was going to ask you, do you? But no.
No, rarely do. And I guess the only other management issue we need to just touch on is pruning.
Yes.
Now, I prune mine only after frosts in the early spring, so when their frosts are all finished. I will then go over and prune any of the dead wood off the plants, and I might remove some of the lower branches because I actually want to keep mine as a tree-like plant. They're quite tall and I want to keep them that way. They hide my chook shed from my fish pond that is above. They also hide the bank below the fish pond because I don't want it to look like a dam. So it gives a backdrop for the pond, and so it actually works really well by keeping them really big. I could in fact cut them quite hard and bring them right down and start them off again if I wanted to, but I like them to be small trees.
So if you were in a climate where you could grow them, one of your uses would be screening.
Yes, they grow extremely quickly. So if you buy a young one that might be, say, in a 15 centimetre or a 6-inch pot, just a little one that's only a few centimetres tall, by the following autumn it will be well above your head.
Wow, so if you wanted a fast screen that's also beautiful and decorative, this is the way to go if you're in a climate with no heavy frosts.
Yes, exactly. And if you are in a climate that's subtropical, you can grow all the other ones I can't grow and do exactly the same thing with them.
So obviously though, if they're in pots, they're going to be contained and not reach the same kind of scale.
In fact, if I were growing in a pot, I would be inclined to remove the lower branches and turn them into a standard because the flowers hang down, particularly in the tropical ones, they're quite big, and they actually show themselves off better if they haven't got foliage below the flowers.
True.
So the flowers hang all below the foliage. So grow them as a standard would be the way I would use some of the tropical ones.
Okay, and I actually do have one in a pot, Mr.
Off you go and do some standardising.
I will. It's only this big, but by next autumn though, sky's the limit.
It certainly is.
So they are all natives of Colombia particularly, or?
This one is Colombian.
Right.
The genus itself, the Brugmansias, comes from through Colombia, Peru, northern Chile, so I'm assuming Bolivia, all those areas of the sort of western side of the Andes. So that's the sort of basic habitat for the genus.
And did it not used to be called Datura?
Yes, and that does raise another interesting thing.
You crazy taxonomists.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, this one makes some sense.
Yeah.
The plants that stayed in Datura, because it still exists as a genus, are generally herbaceous or annual plants that have trumpet-shaped flowers that sit upward. The thorn apple is one particular example of that, which is one of the Daturas, and it's a weedy species. All of the plants that needed to move out of that genus have ended up in Brugmansia, and it became a new genus because the first Datura named was the upward flowering ones, because they were from the Mediterranean and Europe, so they were known well before the South American ones were. So they got called Daturas, so they get to keep the name, even though it's a name that's sometimes used for these. I think we need to move on, and if you're going to give them,
need to move on.
And so if we're going to give them a common name, I would prefer to call them angels' trumpets, which is a perfectly legitimate common name, and they're known well by that name in most parts of the world.
And I can see there's a lot of bees, although we were talking about pollination, there's a lot of bees around yours, so clearly they act very well as pollinators.
I wonder if they make hallucinogenic honey. Now there is another thought.
Wow, that's for our cooking channel, our special cooking channel. Well, Mr. Ryan, thanks for showing us your Brugmansias, as they say in church circles.
I'm pleased you've enjoyed them. I find them a very attractive group of plants. I wish I could grow the more tropical ones. It would be rather fun. But we do have to cut our cloth sometimes. So
we do. But I think for those of us who want to grow them in pots, you can grow either.
Oh yes. I had a white one for years, but I wasn't quick enough to move it indoors when I needed to, so I came unstuck at some stage, and I haven't gone back to visit it again because I can grow this one so well.
Yes, and they really are stunning, the red and the yellow. Well, thank you.
That's a pleasure.
Thank you for watching. We do post every week, so do hit subscribe if that's of interest. And Mr. Ryan, what could we be doing next week?
Goodness knows what we'll be doing next week, but I'm sure it'll be something interesting, and so do come and join us.
It will be captivating and riveting. So until then, thanks for watching.
Bye all.